بسم الله. Okay, well, let's get started. Smaller group today, but khair inshallah. I think that still also works. So I think this is our 10th session, maybe 9th or 10th session. I think 10th actually. Last week we finished the last name that's in that ayah in Surah Al-Hashr, which is the list of names that we have here. المالك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر. So متكبر was the last one in that ayah. I think it's ayah 60 something, I'm forgetting. Surah Al-Hashr. I believe that surah also has some more names. Don't have it in front of me, but so today we're on الخالق, which is a form that we have not come across yet. Kind of came across it a little bit with Al-Malik, because there's some variation here. I think in the official list of 99 names it's Al-Malik, so that's not the standard active participle fa'il form, but often you do hear it used that way. So you do hear Al-Malik instead of Malik. So Malik being king, Malik being the active participle doer noun form. So Al-Khaliq is also that common active participle actor doer form, Al-Khaliq. But interestingly, also the intensive form of this noun is also found in the Quran. I don't think it's in the 99 names. I don't think it's in this list, which is still part of that open question of where did these 99 names come from exactly, which inshallah we'll have an answer to at some point. But the intensive form of Al-Khaliq is found in the Quran as well, I believe twice. I have to switch screens. So if we just go to our corpusquran.com, and we can see that Khalaq is the other intensive form, which is found in the Quran twice, I believe. So most of these, the base form is usually just to create. خلقكم خلق خلق يخلق. It's the base verb, and then I think Al-Khaliq only appears once in Surah Al-Hashr, but then you have these intensive forms which come twice. Not sure which surahs those are. I think one is Kahf, and I don't know what 36 is. So Khaliq, as we all probably already know, is the creator, right? The one who creates. So I think this conversation can go in a lot of different directions, because we have a lot of different concepts and ideas in the root. But just to kind of go over the form really quick, like I said, it's the active participle, and then you have this intensive form here. So Al-Khallaq is also, I guess you can consider it a name or an attribute. It's in the Quran as, just the creator, or in this case, sorry about that, supreme creator. Bala wa huwa al-khallaq al-alim. So Khaliq is,
Sorry, Omar.
yes,
I think there's also خالق كل شيء.
khaliqu kulli shay. Yeah, that would fall under the same as khaliq. It's just not without the
Oh, there's also أحسن الخالقين. فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين.
Yeah, that would also be the plural of the base خالق, active participle form. Yeah, so خالق, خالقين would be plural of that. And I think, yeah, as you mentioned, there is also in the Quran a description of Allah as being khaliq without the article, right? Without saying al-khaliq. Yeah, so I think one interesting thing we can kind of note about the form is that so the base form khaliq means creator, and then if you intensify that by doubling the middle letter, you get khallaq, right? And normally when you double that middle letter and you get the intensive form, you're getting somebody who does that main action, the main verb or the main idea, does it intensely, right? Or does it repeatedly over and over again. So that's kind of the meaning here as well. Most of the explanations that I've heard is that Al-Khaliq is the one who creates out of nothing, and that attribute can also be attributed to human beings as well, right? So we can create things, not necessarily out of nothing, but we can, create like a poem or an art piece, or we can design something, and that's sort of using the same idea. But Allah is also Khallaq, which means that He recreates. It means that He creates better than anybody else. It means that He creates what nobody else can create. So that's a little bit about the form there. I don't think there's too much more we can say about the form. It's a really basic, common form. Khaliq, fa'il is that pattern that you see very often. Yeah. Any questions about the form? I know last week I didn't really explain mutakabbir and that intensive form. There's multiple intensive forms in Arabic, and inshallah, I think I have a way to kind of visualize it in the app. So maybe in a couple more sessions, a lot of these forms that we're coming across will be a lot more clear. One interesting thing that I should have mentioned, I think, previously, is that when you take the base verb, right, you're taking the 3 letters of the base of the root, and usually what you're doing is you're just putting a short vowel on it. You're just putting the fatha on it. So most of the base verbs in Arabic, they start with the 3 letters or 2 letters, second one being doubled, and you just add a fatha on each letter, right? And that gives you the base verb, past tense, masculine form. So in this case, it's khalaqa. And the only thing that changes in that is the middle letter, is the vowel on the middle letter. So for most cases, it's always a fatha, or I would say not always, but most of the time you have that middle letter as having a fatha, and that's usually for action verbs that are denoting some kind of physical action. When you have a kasra or a short e sound on the middle vowel, then that's usually, or a short u sound, the dhamma on the middle letter, then that's usually indicating a change in state or change in quality or something like that. Like for example, last week, the base verb is kabura, right? So it means for something to become large. Yeah, so inshallah we'll have some more features in this app that make learning morphology and understanding morphology a lot simpler. But just to kind of end our little section on morphology here, what happens with the base verb, I mean, you might have heard of like the 10 different forms. All right, so like you have form 1, form 2, form 3, and that's sort of like an Orientalist, Western kind of way of organizing it, which I think is helpful. But what you also might want to keep in mind is that in the language, in the morphology, there are like multiple operations that kind of happen on the base verb. So if you take the base verb and you add an alif in the middle, right, you get khalaqa, which we'll see here in a minute, has an interesting meaning. If you double the middle letter, you get that the alif in the middle, it usually indicates some kind of reciprocity or some kind of duality, something happening between two entities. That's what that alif usually means in any verb in Arabic when you're adding it in the middle. And that's usually in Western linguistics, they usually call that form 2. And then form 3 is when you double that middle letter. So then you get the intensive of the first form. So forms 2 and 3, really, they're just augmentations or transformations of that first form. So then I think you have, so that would be fa'ala, and then fa'ala, and then fa'ala, and then you have, I think, tafa'ala. So that's an augmentation of the second form. And then you have tafa'ala, which is an augmentation of the third form. So if you kind of think of it in that way, I think it kind of helps to see how everything builds off of each other. And like for mutakabbir, right, which we had last week, you're adding that meme to the augmentation of the second form. So the second form would be kabbara. Sorry, you're adding the meme to the augmentation of the third form. Yeah, so inshallah I'll have some visuals and some tables that will make this a lot more easier to understand. But yeah, so let's move on to the root, inshallah. Unless anybody has any questions on morphologies or any ideas or any thoughts on that.
I think you said you would look at the meanings of the letters themselves and their sounds.
Oh yeah, we can get into that, inshallah, too. I don't know if it makes sense to do that before we get into the root, but if anybody has any thoughts, it's always a great place to start. If anyone has any thoughts on the sound of khalaqa, khalq, khallaq. Actually, I think we can start with the meaning of the sounds. I don't know why everyone's calling me right now. So does anybody have any like feelings?
I heard, I don't have any feelings about the sounds themselves, but I remember reading or hearing somewhere that like khalaqa and falaqa, they kind of like evoke similar like imagery,
What's
like
the second
something
word?
that was created with like falaqa, like
Oh,
falaq,
falaqa. Oh, okay. Yeah.
like yeah, kind of like a Big Bang style creation, I guess. I was wondering what you think of that.
That's interesting. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. So when we talk about letter meanings, you know, I think I mentioned this before. You know, the challenge is that you're trying to describe something, you're trying to define something or describe it by using the thing itself. You're trying to describe sound by using sound. You know, it's kind of like defining a word by using the word. It becomes a little circular, which isn't necessarily like problematic. It doesn't mean you can't do it. There are actually sciences that deal with stuff like that. But it becomes a bit subjective and a bit arbitrary. So that's why I just kind of throw the question out there if anybody has any feelings on like, you know, what does the sound feel like to you? So it might be better to, you know, in the future anyway, to start with the root and then go into the letters. But we can kind of start with just my own impressions, right? And then maybe that'll spark some interest or spark some feelings themselves. So the kha sound is a for me it kind of has like a frail kind of sense to it, right? It kind of has like a dispersed kind of sense for me as well. Similar to like sheen as well. Sheen has also that kind of like spreading, dispersed sort of feeling to it. I think there are some other kha, sheen, fa a little bit. There's also like the kind of the I forget the IPA term. It's not sibilant, it's maybe fricative, but I don't think kha is a fricative. I forget what the technical term is, but they all have this kind of like,
Yeah, I think kha is a fricative.
is kha fricative?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, so they're sounds that they kind of flow, but there's some obstruction, right? So they have this kind of sense of like spreading. But to go back to what you were saying about khalq and falq. So trying to come up with meanings for letters is difficult sometimes, but what we can do instead is look at partial roots. Partial roots kind of give us a really interesting insight into the sound of the meaning of sounds, and that's because they're a little bit more consistent. And khalq is actually a really great example of that, because in many of the words or roots that start with the kha and the lam, khalq, there's this idea of preservation or permeation even. Khal is vinegar in Arabic. So this is one of the cool features that we can do actually in this app, is that you can look just at the partial root. So if we just put khal and then we leave the last letter here as
But I'm sorry, isn't that like wouldn't that be with a shadda? So that would be khalala, right?
yeah. Well, the khal is vinegar, but yeah, it would come from kha lam lam. Yeah, like the root would be two lambs at the end. Yeah. So it might be better to look at the table here. So like khalada, for example, is eternity. That's usually that's kind of the general meaning of that root there. Khalaja, I don't know what that is from actually, but it is one of the words that we use for geographically the Khalij, right? So Gulf. Where's
Khalwa being like isolation and kind of preserving oneself in that way.
yeah, khala is another one. That's being alone. Khalil is another one that I was thinking of, which I don't think will come up here unless we do that, which I have to fix. But yeah, khalala, vinegar, true friendship. So that's kind of it's a bit of a tangent from al-Khaliq, but you kind of see a bit of the Arab mind, I feel like, when you see how vinegar and true friendship come from the same root, right? And also this idea of permeation, right? Takhalla, right? Because when you pickle something, right, or like in Arabic we say khallal, right? If you pickle something, you're usually one way of pickling anyway is to take a food and preserve it in vinegar, right? So we call that khallala in Arabic, which is kind of beautiful in the way it relates to friendship, because what happens when you pickle something is like the thing that gets pickled, it becomes permeated and completely it absorbs the liquid, right? It absorbs the vinegar, and that's what preserves it. And Khalil is one of the words of friend that is like a really, really close friend, right? It's not like some other words that you might have for friend. So that's just
It's Ibrahim alayhi salam's station with Allah,
Khalil,
like that's his maqam.
exactly, yeah, Khalilullah, right? He was like the friend of Allah. The English falls short here because there's not too many words in English for friend. I think we have in the group a group chat like a couple of pictures showing the different levels of friendship in Arabic, and Khalil being like one of the highest levels. So when you're looking at partial roots, you can get a little bit more of an idea of how two letters form a meaning, it's kind of like a baby step that you can take before you start looking at, the meanings of letters. Because the meanings of letters really, at least in my research and in my observation and my study, the letters are really just reflecting like basic human senses, right? So like smoothness, roughness, quickness, fastness. Fastness is not a word, but you get what I'm trying to point at here. Okay, so let's go back to Al-Khaliq, the creator. So
Can I say something real quick about falaq
Yeah, of course.
and khalaq? Yeah, so I just looked it up and
Oh, sorry. What I was going to say there was
it
that.
says,
Yeah,
oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
it's actually a synonym for khalq. So it says falaq, ism, khalq, makhluqat, creatures, created beings, living creatures, any living being. But what I was going for was this. فلق الله الصبح أبدأه وأوضحه فلق شق شطر شق. Yeah, so it was just like shaqqa, and even what you said about kha being like what you think it means. Here it says like falaq means to break open, to split open, to become cracked, to tear something apart forcibly. So that just like evoked for me, like the Big Bang style of creation, but also like the creation, for example, of a plant, like germination of a seed, splitting open, like inna Allah khaliqul habbi wan nawa. Like that is creation. That's like the root, literally, under the earth, like creation. Cleaving. It also says cleaving and fissure, breaking, splitting, and how much of creation is like comes from that, like from two, I don't know, like cells or something splitting, or stars splitting, atoms splitting, and new elements are formed. So that's why I just thought khalaq and khalaq are really close.
Yeah, what I was going to say was when you look at roots that are related to each other by the first two letters, it's a little bit easier to see a theme as opposed to when you're looking to roots that are related by the last two letters. So it's a little bit of a like a mental kind of puzzle, right? Because it's kind of it's sort of similar to when you're looking at anagrams, right? Like you kind of try and wonder what the relationship is between roots that have the same letters but are kind of jumbled around. So, I mean, it's a big topic, but yeah, I mean, it's something that you can explore here. I just kind of looked up. I just did a quick partial root search here, looking at lam and qaf at the end here to see if there's anything that kind of is similar. So you have falaq here, which I know to be primarily meaning to split something, which is very common in Arabic. There are lots of words for
Oh
splitting.
wow, there's also alaq. خلق الإنسان من علق.
Yeah, alaqa being like to hang or like a clot. Alaqa means to hang generally. Yeah, I don't recognize many of the other words. We can take a quick look. Ta'allaqa, aliqa. Oh, okay, yeah, that means to like shine. Baliqa, or what might help here is kind of to continue what I was saying about the the meanings of the letters here. So kha being having this kind of like dispersed, spreading kind of like sense for me, and qaf has a very like I think somebody mentioned this in group. Was it you, Maham? I thought you mentioned something about Ibn Jinni. I think qaf having a very like
Yeah.
Yeah, a very like
Like
ancient.
reaching the crux or something.
Yeah. So qaf has like, I mean, I think you can even feel it and hear it in the sound, right? Like qaf, like it's very, it's all the way in the back of the throat. One of the more difficult letters to pronounce. It has this very like old, like feeling to me, like ancient or like something that's base or like very close to the earth or like very grounded, very stable. Is that the kind of meaning the kind of sense that I get? And then the lam to me is also is very transitory, very like connecting. That's the kind of senses that I get. It's one of the easiest letters to pronounce. Um, it has this very like transitory kind of sense to it, right? Like linking kind of sense to it, I think. So if you kind of plug in all those ideas, right? Like dispersal, right? Spreading, and then connecting, and then like old and ancient and grounded, right? That's what creation is to me, right? That's kind of how I visualize creation in this word, at least, right? In this root of khaliq. And once we look at the root, we can see that some of this is kind of carried through. So one of the interesting things is this idea of smoothness, and there's also like an opposite meaning here as well. Let's see.
Worn out. It's at the bottom.
Yeah, that's probably gonna redirect. Yeah, or so khalqi, khalqa, khalq. Smooth here is akhlaq. So smooth and solid. I think this one also has, yeah, so it has another signification here. Well, this is just meaning poor or destitute, poor in respect, smoothness, evenness. I guess it wasn't this word. There's another word here that also has it has both meanings. So the idea of like something being smooth or something also being worn out. So I think,
Yeah, like smoothness is being like a kind of being worn out, right? Because it's like you erode something or you sand something down or whatever, and then it becomes smooth. So it is kind of like a form of being worn out.
okay, that's an interesting way of thinking of it. Let's see here. Smooth, instead of the back of a horse. Ukhluq.
Because nothing occurs in nature that's naturally like completely like spherical or completely smooth. Like not really, unless it's like something like a volcanic rock or something like that. But usually, like for example, for the earth or for rocks, like it's the passage of water or something that erodes it over time that then creates like a smoother surface on it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense too. I mean, I kind of always thought of it as like smoothness is um, is is like something that's very like it's a detail, right? It's a detail of creation, right? It's something that you don't really notice unless you're really like appreciating the creation of something. And then something that's worn out, I mean, also kind of connects to the sense of something that's created for me, in the sense that kind of like what Maham said actually in the group chat about like biting into like that visual of like biting into like a dessert, right? That was textured and like crumbly or something like that. Um, I feel like the root kind of captures like the most like subtle aspect of creation. That's kind of the sense that I get from from this root. So I mean, it's kind of up in the air how you would kind of, where you would kind of put the heart of the meaning here, right? Because so all these things are like physical things that we're talking about, but
Could you expand effect in nature? Like, what's that root?
where do you see that?
Right there, like right where you are, like a little bit above.
Oh, affect a nature. تخلق. So تخلق is the تفاعل form. So that's usually reflexive. Affected a خلق. Yeah, so it means to like fake a characteristic that you don't have. Which is
But sorry, the way that you said it sounds kind of like it has a negative connotation.
yeah.
But there's also, I think it's a hadith. I mean, there's a positive connotation too, because there's a hadith and it's literally about the names of Allah. تخلقوا بأخلاق الله. And I don't know if it's a hadith or it's just like a quotation from Ghazali, but like that's what the Sufi, the I guess the overarching perspective that we're meant to have towards the names, most of them, with few exceptions like Al-Mutakabbir, is to takhallaq bi akhlaqillah, to become those names. Like I guess, I mean, it's not negative because we know that like we're never going to be that. So I guess it is a kind of faking or like putting on, I guess, like clothing.
Yeah, I
But
suppose.
there's also I think a dua for like when you look at yourself in the mirror. اللهم حسنت خلقي فحسن خلقي.
Yes.
So there's also like the creation of the inner creation, like khalq and khuluq,
Yeah.
like the characteristics, internal characteristics as well as external.
Yeah. That's a
Also,
great.
in the context of putting on, there's also like it's recommended actually that when you read the Quran, you should weep. And if you are not being able to weep, then you should pretend that you are weeping until either you do actually weep or you just keep pretending that you're weeping, just to like kind of align yourself with that and to kind of train yourself, but also to just kind of be in accordance with that thing of like the Quran should affect you and move you, and if it doesn't, then you have to kind of put on that kind of like effect until it becomes like your norm, to soften your heart.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think what's really interesting here is that like I can't think of like a good way to say this in English. Like just translating it sounds negative, but it's not necessarily negative in Arabic here. And I think one of the reasons for that is because one of the words that comes from this root, like I think Zinira or Maha mentioned, is khuluq. So khuluq means character. I don't know why I don't see it. It should be here somewhere. Okay, let's just switch to Arabic. It'll be easier for me. But I mean, we know khuluq is character, or good characters. So there it is. So I think that's one of the more beautiful aspects of sorry, so many things going on. It's one of those days. One of the more beautiful aspects of the Arabic language, in that like the idea of creation, right? The idea of like something being physically created from God is directly tied to the idea of character, right? And then we have like one of the more famous hadith that has this this word in it, which is إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق, where the Prophet ﷺ says that like the only reason I was sent down was to perfect honorable character. Um, and I think Zinira mentioned another dua or hadith or maham. Sorry, I can't see the names. Um, which was Allahumma ahsin khuluqi kama ahsanta khalqi, right? Which is, oh Allah, make my khuluq, make my character as perfect as you made my khalq, my creation. So I think it's kind of an open question maybe for everybody, where you think the heart of the meaning lies here. So in a future update, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I think um, uh, I'll have like the etamin, right, which is the root word of etymology, right, etamin. So the heart of the root, really, or the root meaning, as we kind of say colloquially, will be highlighted, right? So like in Ar-Rahman, or Ra, Ha, Mim, Boom is the etamin, we could say, or the heart of the meaning there. So in this case, it's a little bit, maybe the best thing to say is khuluq, right? Because khuluq is character. But khuluq to me is kind of abstract. That's why I started the conversation talking about like smoothness and roughness, right? Because I think that there's like, it kind of helps, at least for me, to conceptualize God, right? Al-Khaliq, the creator, right? He's the one that like, he's the one that created everything with all of its detail. How the smoothness of your skin, or the smoothness of rock that's been eroded by rain. I think that's actually in one of these words over here. And that also may connect to like how things wear down, right? Is because of I think Zinira, you said this as well, because something that's smoothed, especially by nature, something that becomes smooth by nature is essentially worn down or eroded down. So I didn't think about that actually before, but that's a beautiful point, and that kind of ties in, the paradoxical meaning of smoothness and wearing away. But yeah, so I don't know. It's up to you. I don't think like we have to stick to one thing. I think we can say the heart of them. I mean, I think you can think of khuluq, character, as physical too. So it's up to you guys. Anyway, there's a couple of hands up if anybody wanted to share some thoughts. No?
Yeah, Maham said that. I don't want to be taking credit on you. But yeah, okay, so
Oh,
I just
sorry.
looked up, so I just had a thought about like, so I practice like an energy healing modality, which is called theta healing. And I thought it was really interesting that in theta healing, we basically like go into a meditative state and then we pray to God. But the woman who created theta healing, created, quote unquote, she basically came with the words like when we make the prayer, we say, Creator of all that is. And then we say, can you please do such and such, right? But then she explicitly says the creator of all that is, who is God. So I just thought it was really interesting about why like it is the name creator of all that is, which is the name in the Quran, خالق كل شيء, and like what it is about that, um, like what it is about that, like about Khaliq specifically, that we're using to access as opposed to say, I don't know, Rab or like something else, right? and and then I think for me like it goes back to like creating from scratch. We can sort of like we can create some things. For example, I was just going to go bake a cake, and it's called baking a cake from scratch, right? But it's actually technically not, because I'm still using flour. I still need to be provided with like flour and sugar and things that I didn't grow myself, things that I didn't produce myself. But I can call it baking from scratch, but it's not. So in the true sense of the word khalaqa, this is actually something we physically cannot embody, because we physically cannot create anything from scratch unless the ingredients for whatever it is are there. Sorry, that was my mom. Anyway, so then we can't actually create anything from scratch. So then that means that only God creates from scratch. So that means there's also this quote in the Quran. Mm, أفمن يخلق كمن لا يخلق أفلا تذكرون والذين يدعون من دون الله لا يخلقون شيئا وهم يخلقون. So Allah saying actually you can't create. Nobody can create except for God, and you are all created. And that for me like kind of links back to Al-Mutakabbir, where it's like evoking this humility. You're a created being, so like act like it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. I was going to say something about what was the session thing that you were talking about, the therapy thing, or the like the meditative, you called it something?
It's called theta healing.
FEPA?
No, theta like alpha, beta, theta.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, if you could share more about that in the group, that might be helpful for some people. So yeah, you brought an interesting point, I think, which I was wondering if we would talk about, especially because I think some people in the group are more familiar with Ibn Arabi, and some mystic thought than I am. But I feel like the idea of khaliq, right, the idea of a creator, necessarily implies khalq, right? So there's that binary there of like khaliq and khalq, right? Creator and creation. So there's a necessary separation there, right? But I don't know if that's problematic in in Ibn Arabi's thought, or in some mystic thought, from what I understand, where the idea is that God is everything, right? Only God, nothing exists besides God. But I feel like you'd have to solve the problem of what is khalq then, right? Khalq is khalq God? Maybe khalq is illusion. That's one kind of thought that I had there. There's one more point I wanted to make on the last thing that you said. Maybe it'll come to me. If anybody has any other thoughts, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted. Firstly, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Working last time. But I've been thinking on like this idea or reality that in every single moment Allah is creating everything. So it's like this, I don't remember how I heard it, or like I'm not sure if the wording makes sense, but it's this idea that Allah is creating everything from scratch in every single second, every breath that we take.
Right.
And then it got me to thinking that like khalaqa, it's like an action, but then al-khaliq is the creator, and it's usually translated as the one who created everything from nothing. And then this is like a bit of a sidetrack, but I was trying to understand like this element of constantly manifesting through other names. So for Al-Hadi, that makes sense, like constantly the one who constantly guides. But then there's Al-Quddus, that's the pure, and then that didn't make sense in terms of Allah, but it made sense in terms of like the one who's constantly purifying us. So just it's a bit of like a thought that's up in the air, but I guess I would appreciate your thoughts on it, if there's any like part of the definition. Like I know that some names are names of Allah's being, but then there's an element of action in it. So just any thoughts on it, really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think what you're kind of alluding to is the ayah in Surah Ar-Rahman, which is كل يوم هو في شأن, right? In every yawm, or every day, he is in sha'n, he is in some kind of business or some kind of doing.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think maybe Ibn Arabi or other mystical kind of thinking would go deeper into like how all of the names manifest, in every moment, and it's kind of an
Mm.
interesting idea scientifically too, to think about like how every moment. I don't know how you would define a moment exactly, but every moment
Yeah.
God creates everything again, right? He creates existence again, and then it disappears, and then
Mm.
He creates it again. So that's an interesting idea. Um, with Quddus, I think we talked about this a little bit in that session, but um, uh, really, I think that the meaning there is more that Allah is the one who is the most pure. So it's,
Mm.
I think, kind of maybe the way you would maybe kind of connect it to that idea of Allah is constantly creating or constantly recreating the universe and existence, is that in a way God is kind of constantly purified, or constantly one of the main ideas in Quddus is the idea of going, like qadasa, we said means to go far away, right? To go to like a
Oh,
maqdis,
wow.
for example, is a sanctuary, and usually it's very far away from
Mm.
people. So the main idea that we kind of decided on there was that like that's what purity really means in this sense, right? In this root, in this word, is like what we say in Arabic, tanzih, or like being separated from anything, everything else, being in a class all your own, and that's really the main theme in every single name of Allah that we look at. Every single name of Allah is really kind of saying the same thing: the best, the most exceptional, the most exclusive, the most, even in a word like khaliq, right, which we translate as creator. And like we said, humans can kind of create as well, right? Not in the same way that God creates. We don't create out of nothing, but we have creativity, right, which comes from the same root as create. So the idea is similar, but we can't create the way God creates, right? We can't create out of nothing. We can't create anything, remotely as magnificent or as amazing as anything that God creates. Another interesting word here is this one here. I'm not sure if anybody noticed it, but perfumed him. So خلقه. So that's the intensive form, which means to rub over with perfume. To rub over somebody with perfume. So it's kind of interesting that you have the base form is khalaqa, to create. Khallaqa means to rub perfume on him, on somebody, or on somebody. I think there's also another variation of this word here. I think maybe under perfume, khaluq. No, I think there was another one that I saw. Yeah, the English never helps me here. I think it was khalaqa actually, which I think is the reciprocal form. Khalaqahum. Oh, okay. So not perfume, or maybe it's later in the definition. But khalaqa here is that second form with the alif in the middle. And like I said, that alif morphologically always implies some kind of duality, some kind of two entities being involved. And that's the idea that's in this meaning here. He consorted with him, or with their natures, or with their moral characters. Yeah, probably some more interesting uses of that word that I can find and share in the group. Yeah, I guess one last thing we can do is look at the anagrams here, if anybody.
I had a thought, Sili.
Yeah, of course.
So I was meditating on what you guys were saying, and just kind of just Khaliq, like just dropping completely back to like, you know, how we think of Khaliq typically as like the creator. And like, you know, even like human creativity and all of this kind of stuff, the impulse to create, even if we're not creating from scratch, you know, like, and just, I think the creativity is like, it wants to create from scratch. Like obviously we can't because we're human beings, but it like creativity is it, the way it happens is like, there's like a blank void inside your mind. And then something sparks there. That is like, there's the blank void is like the canvas that is like, you know, the inside of like your brain. And then in it are like the connections and, you know, the things, the visuals, the sounds, the kind of things that you have been exposed to, that you're thinking about. And then the spark of creativity is what kind of creates like new connections and then wants to make something out of them. You know, even if that's just like not really something specific, it could just be like something, you know, how we think about like, oh, this is an original idea. And we think about it like that because the idea comes to us seemingly from out of nowhere, but obviously it's informed by, you know, the things that have influenced us and the things that are important to us and so on.
Right.
But I was thinking about Khaliq, and it's like the creator, like when you create something, there's like such love there, you know, like it's the one who creates something is intimately familiar with all of the different like dimensions and quirks and, you know, all the like details of that thing, and it loves that thing not despite those characters, but for precisely those characteristics and those kind of features. And then if we think about even like an act of creation or whatever, I think it's all about trying to like return to the source. So like he's Khaliq, he loves us, and I think in everything, in all particles and all atoms and in everything in creation, there is like a yearning. And that yearning is a yearning to return to him because he's the source, he's the ocean, and we're kind of all the droplets and, you know, the mist and the vapor, that everything that is in you know, creation. And it all longs to kind of merge back in with him. And so I think anything that we do is an attempt, and I think our acts of creation are kind of like tributes and our attempts to re-merge with him. And so I was thinking about khuluq, but I was also thinking about the khalluq, right? Like, so you said that you might place the heart of the meaning on khuluq, because there's kind of like this excellence of character and, you know, this kind of like a manifestation. So it's like, where do you go from, you know, something like the root khalaqa. But I think even that khuluq, like it's all about love, right? Like when you want, what you want is you want to be something that is going to be beloved to Allah, and you also want to embody characteristics that are beloved to you. And so I think all of that ultimately comes under the umbrella of the khalluq. And I think the khalluq, like this putting on, or this, you know, attempting, this trying, this iterating with the self, and, you know, with like the versions of ourselves and our lives, it's all like an act of love. And so the khalluq might like be kind of a better umbrella for me. I had more thoughts. Hang on, let me.
No, that's
yeah,
great.
like everything.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's just the same. Like everything is kind of, it's like everything yearns for him, and everything is kind of like a manifestation of him, but really it's kind of like a manifestation of there's that hadith qudsi of like, you know, Allah longed to be known, he loved to be known, and so he created mankind so that they may know him. And, you know, like this, it's like this, the hidden treasure is like an image that is at the top of that hadith. And it's like, yeah, like I think if we root through love, which is like, I think a necessary element for creation, love and yearning, I think everything, like as it explodes and kind of disperses, like we say with kha, you know, everything like goes outwards and disperses. It is by necessity. I think yearning is like a thing that wants to go backwards, but I think it is also the thing that propels everything, because yearning breeds, like it is bred from separation, and separation is bred from like things dispersing. And so I think kha like really unravels, but then also finds like the way for return. And then qaf is like the what is the crux? The crux is love, and the crux is that yearning and that return to the source. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. That actually, really kind of helped me understand this because it's a really simple root or really simple meanings, but how you all connect them together is is a bit of a puzzle, right? Like, um, so yeah, thank you for that. It made me also think of like um, how creativity is kind of like takhalluq in a way, right? Because like having good character, it's not just like it's not just like you could take a class and you have good character, right? Like it is a creative process, I didn't really realize that until we had this conversation. So thank you, Maham and Zanira and everybody that contributed. Um, I'm not sure, how popular these sessions are with everybody, but I think it might also give some people. I mean, I think it is popular with some people. I think some people really like it, but I think it also might give some people anxiety because it's a little bit of it's uncharted territory for sure. A lot of these sessions for me are really like a laboratory session. That's kind of why me and Joshua stuck to like the name Lisān Lab, or at least that's why I kind of liked it, because it is really like a lab, and we are really like experimenting and just trying to kind of see, well, there isn't really you're not going to find a text, maybe like Ibn Jinni or maybe Ibn Faris, goes into like what smoothness and roughness has to do with creation. But I don't think so. And even so, they're not common sources that are widely discussed. So again, thank you to everybody that participates in these conversations. Um, uh, Inshallah, it will be part of a larger project. Zinir, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I have so many things. So
Yeah.
first of all, what you just said about subhanAllah, the creativity of akhlaq, like like khuluq.
Hmm.
Subhanallah, that's like what my teacher, Dr. Mukhtar Ali, he teaches Ibn Arabi. He told me about like disciplining kids, and in like South Asian culture, disciplining kids is about like hitting them and making them not, yelling at them, and that's how you instill khulq in them, apparently. But he
Hmm.
told me that's not what it's about. It's actually to teach them an art and to make them commit to it. And through that art, that creative process, by perfecting it, they perfect their nafs. Not they, we should commit to an art. And by perfecting it, we perfect our nafs. And so, for instance, if, I mean, I don't play music, so I don't know. But I mean, I guess dancing, like, like I can tell from the way that, my body moves, how far I need to maybe let go of, not take myself too seriously, or if my inhibitions are too lifted, like, to keep the balance, right? For instance, like
Right.
balance is one of the principles of the universe. And then like there's different arts, like, and I guess the most importantly, one that like pervades all arts is like patience. You cannot perfect an art most often you can't perfect an art without patience, and that builds patience. And like you don't, like you said, it is a creative process. You can't read a book and learn patience, and you can't read a book and learn humility, and art teaches you humility because you fail at it sometimes. So yeah, that was apparently, and I think Dr. Ali as well said that originally, Sufis weren't people that, or like people who are committing to the path of tasawwuf and of just like tazkiyat and nafs, they weren't people who had access to the religious books. So they weren't religious scholars. They weren't people who had access to writing. They were like carpenters or farmers, and their perfection of their nafs was through their art. So the other thing was about what Mahan said about like she said that we create from the void, and that reminded me of this ayah that I already had. But I was thinking about how creation, the number of creation is three, like the numerology of it. Even in like pop numerology, it's three. And I was thinking about like if that is true, like from a Quranic perspective. And so in the
Wait.
Quran, Allah says,
Wait. Sorry. Could you
Mhm.
clarify that? So do you mean khalq, like the word khalq, or khaliq, or what
No,
is
no,
three?
no. It's just no, no. I mean, it's just the energy of creativity is like represented by the number three.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't look up the number,
Ah, I see. I see.
but I'll look it up. Yeah.
No, three
So then
was
it
yeah.
says in the Quran, it says يخلقكم في بطون أمهاتكم خلقا من بعد خلق في ظلمات ثلاث. ذلكم الله ربكم له الملك لا إله إلا هو فأنا تصرفون. So there's this creation, and like, first one very obvious thing that we didn't say is one of the most like obvious manifestations of this is the mother, like any mother, whether that's an animal mother or a human mother. But one mother with a womb, that's like a manifestation. That's like, a more obvious manifestation of the name Al-Khaliq, because that womb is the portal of creativity. And that is what Allah is calling it, like zulumat, which is like kind of like what Mahan said about a void, of like just a spark of creativity coming from the darkness, which is kind of like the ruh, the spark of light from God coming into the darkness of the womb and being blown into the darkness of the womb. And then what she said about like creativity and love reminded me of like this thing that I was looking into in terms of Rahim. I was actually not there during those sessions, but once I did like this, I was just looking into like Rahman and how women are more of a manifestation of that. And I found that women bond through like oxytocin more than men do, and women in general have like higher levels of oxytocin than men do. And but what's really interesting is that the womb as a center of love and the act of creation is the fact that when a woman is having contractions, like labor contractions, the higher the oxytocin goes, basically it contracts, right? It leads to contraction, but it's also called the love hormone, one of the love hormones. So it also leads to love in the mother. So it's like this is like the hormone of creation and of love, you know? It's like
Wow.
it's the same thing. It's like the birthing, and it's also kind of like a falak if you think about it, because it's there's a splitting open to for it's like for this of a portal, almost like from this
Yeah.
for this baby to come out into this world. And then that is what creates that love hormone. Not only brings the baby, creates it like by, and also like ideally, I guess, in an ideal world, like sex as an act of like loving creation. That is also another form of love. I wanted to say something, I think Majd Majd left. But basically, what she said about, and what you said, Omar, about like the Wahdat al-Wujud type cosmology, there's no problem there, because in fact this is a name where like we're very, very dependent on in the cosmology, because for instance, the Shaykh al-Akbar Ibn Arabi says that I think khalq, or like the creation, is huwa la huwa,
Yeah.
or it is haq and la haq, like it is both him and it is not him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, khalq is fully dependent on God for existence at its every moment. So, and this is like what Makt was saying, and that is in the ayah. It's not just, it's more obviously in this ayah. وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ. So it's like this ayah, like these names, Al-Mubdi and Al-Mu'id. And so these are linked with creation. And in the cosmology of Ibn Arabi, but not just Ibn Arabi, because that's more of like a, I don't want to say marginal, it's not marginal by any means, but not everybody accepts it. But even in like mainstream cosmology, the Sufi cosmology, there's this idea that at every moment, the universe disappears into non-existence, and then Allah recreates it anew completely from scratch. So then, and the reason for that is like a philosophical reason. The reason being that if any particle, or like, if any created being, let's say, can continue to exist for more than one moment, then it can continue to exist for 3 moments and 4 moments. So then it can continue basically ad infinitum. And so it doesn't need, it can basically be eternal, which means it can basically, which implies that it can basically be God, but it can't be God. So therefore, nothing can actually exist for more than one moment, like continuously. Therefore, everything is being annihilated at every single moment. There's an annihilation and a creation from scratch. And this is even in like Al-Ghazali. It's really funny because, so for example, one of the things he says is like, I think, this one is the from Ibn Arabi, the example of white and black. So like, if something is like my phone screen, let's say, is right now white, and it continues to be white, not because of, it's like, yeah, the frames of a film, but basically, this frame that I'm looking at right now versus the frame that I was looking at while I was speaking, let's say, about the womb, is a completely different frame. And the only reason why it's still white is because God recreated it as white. But God could have recreated it as black just as easily. For me, that would have been perceived by me as a miracle, but that's not a miracle for God. It's just the way that God is already creating and recreating everything from scratch. And Al-Ghazali has this like funny commentary about like example of like why is it that like if you leave your house and you leave like a book on the desk, and if you come back, like why is it still a book? And why has it not turned into a handsome, beardless slave boy? Those were his like that's how they translated it. I don't know. Like his ghulam is what they meant, what he meant. But
Yeah.
yeah, like there was that's the extent to which they believe it. Like we even I believe it. I mean I know it. Is that everything is actually just being recreated completely. It's not like it's literally a brand new thing. Like you or I'm a literally a brand new person. My body is a brand new body, everything is brand new. So it's like, and I think it also goes back to like la takrara fil khalq. There's no repetition in creation. Like God does not repeat. And so there's that, which is just like completely like insane. Like, you know, that that's such a paradigm shift in so many ways. And it's just like kind of forces you to see everything as a miracle and not just. So it's almost like if something is the same, that's more of a miracle than if it like, you know, fire turns into fire turns cold or something. But it's like, oh, my skin is still white. But can you believe it? Like everything was recreated from scratch and my skin is still white. But you don't see that as something perplexing or like astonishing. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't studied Ibn Arabi enough to wrap my you know mind around it. But I think that the main idea for me is that perception is limited, right? I think that's the main idea that that I get from the idea of the creation is God and it's not God, or like I'm not sure exactly how it's put, but it's that the idea that something is God but not God, right? Or the idea that God is everything but or everything is God but nothing is God too. I think that's another way of it kind of being said. I think all of these kind of things just they all kind of point to the idea that our perception is limited, right? That what we see is, you know, uh, we can kind of even just say it's an illusion, right? And I think there are, there's elements of the Quran, I think, or aspects of the Quran that could kind of, validate that or confirm that, that this life is merely a distraction, right? Like the next life is the true life. This life is just an illusion and a test. So I think that's what a lot of the mystic thought kind of points me to, is this idea that perception is limited. But I think the interesting thing is that perception is limited in a structured way, right? It's there's God doesn't just create the universe and annihilate it every moment. Um, and it's not just like a surface level thing, right? It's a deep thing, right? It's everything that we perceive has layers and structure to it. Um, and I think that kind of ties in beautifully also to the root, right? Because we're talking about smoothness, or I keep going back to that idea of like smoothness and delicateness and something like dispersed and something worn out, because it kind of just it's kind of like when you think of God, for me at least, you kind of have this very like zoomed out wide lens, but this root khalq, it really kind of gives me a very, very zoomed in kind of like feeling, very zoomed in kind of perspective as to the nature of creation and the power of the creator to create with such intricacy and subtlety and layers and structure. I gotta start taking notes while you guys are talking, because I get so many thoughts and then I I didn't have coffee today, so I forget them. But inshallah, I think I'll be thinking about this session for the next couple of days, so I will be sure to share any thoughts that I have here. I think one of the most important ones really is this idea of good character being like part of the creative process. So thanks again to everybody that kind of contributed to that thought. Yeah, I think maybe what we can do is kind of maybe maybe since I'm recording these meetings, maybe I can kind of have some meeting notes, or we can publish like a small little article. I can share it with the group, and that can be kind of like a TLDR for people that haven't joined the sessions, or people that just want to extract the juicy bits. Any other thoughts? My mind is still kind of stuck on the creativity of good manners. So I think I'm gonna sit on that for a while. If we don't have any other thoughts, then yeah, jazakumullah khair
You
again.
know, the way that you
No, no.
said that, also like kind of reminded me, I mean, not reminded me, kind of opened up for me like another way to look at like good manners. Because of like today we were talking about like respect, and this is gonna sound weird, but like kissing specifically, in like how that's different in different cultures, perceived differently in different cultures. And so like when you say the creativity of good manners, it's also like, so for instance, so for instance, in like South Asian culture, at least as far as I know, when we kiss, like, if we give a kiss on the forehead, it's usually to someone who's like really young, like much younger than us. It's like a sign of rahma, um, and like mercy, and like, just the kind of rahma, the compassion that you would have for someone who's smaller and like more helpless than you, compared to you, right? But then, in like, at least in Arab culture, I think it's more the opposite. Like where I live, I see like, grown men, they'll kiss like their mother or their grandmothers on their forehead, and it's seen as a sign of respect and submission. So there's that, but then also there's like, if you say like good manners, like creativity of good manners, it's like the way that every single person needs to be treated is different. Like as a teacher, some of my kids are comfortable with things that some other kids are really, would find really hurtful. So like I have to be creative with my good manners in that sense. Like I have to be creative with sensing, like energetically, like who's okay with this, who's okay with this kind of joke, right? Who might take offense to this. And even with like me as a student, with teachers as well, you have to do it. But like just with anybody really. Like you don't know. Like what is good manners for one person might actually be offensive to another person. And so like that, there is a creativity involved in there with like sensing. And then like, I guess, like you said, like in terms of takhalluk, almost like a performance, putting on the right manners for the right place. I think there's a quote, لكل مقال مقام لكل مقام مقال.
Yeah.
It's one of those. But yeah, like that's also the creativity of good manners. It's like knowing what to say, when to say, who to say it to, and when that would be good manners and when that would not be good manners. And for instance, in the Quran, Allah says that وَالَّذِينَ يَغُضُّونَ أَصْوَاتَهُمْ عِنْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. So like lowering your voice in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like that's good manners. And whereas that might not be good manners. Like if I lower my voice in front of my kids while I'm teaching them, that's not very helpful. So yeah, I don't know, just random.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, very good point. Remind me of that hadith where I think the Prophet ﷺ, he was like he kissed a little boy or a young child, I think, and there was like a chieftain or somebody well known in the community, like a elderly person, and he was like very boastfully saying, "Oh, I've never kissed any of my kids in like 20 years or something like that, or I've never kissed any of my kids in my entire life." And the Prophet ﷺ was just like, well, I'll find the hadith and share the exact wording, but the translation that I've come across was like, well, what am I supposed to do with somebody like you? Well, how can I help somebody like this? Kind of like throwing his hands up in the air, sort of kind of feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So,
Amr,
that
I
part
actually
is
shared that in the group literally today. So it's like, he said, what can I do if Allah has lifted mercy out of your heart? Which
right,
is
right, right.
really like, I don't know, that's quite,
Yeah,
yeah, that's quite something.
yeah, for sure. All right, great, inshallah. Yeah, I
Sorry,
did.
Maham was saying something. I
Oh, sorry.
interrupted. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say the same thing. I was gonna like complete that. Like, what can I do? Can I help it if Allah's lifted mercy from your heart? But yeah, you got there.
Right, right. Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is that, again, thank you again for everyone's participation. Like I said, this is really like an ongoing experiment. And maybe it'll be more concrete with some, supplemental stuff and development in the app, which hopefully, inshallah, I have some big updates coming up. But the other thing I wanted to say, which I mentioned last week, was about grounding. And, we were talking about kabir and mutakabbir and how that's related to like physical size. So I thought it was a good segue to talk about sunnah sports and, how we ground the body externally, right? These sessions, studying language, studying etymology, studying semiotics and how meaning is made or how meaning is formulated in the mind, this is really about grounding the self internally from the inside out. But the other half of Islam, the other half of our faith, the other half of, living a good life is grounding yourself from the outside in, right? And that's what we went over last week briefly with what some people on the internet are calling sunnah sports, grounding the body using the recommended activities that the Prophet ﷺ recommended, which are much more broad than usually conveyed, right? It's not just swimming, it's not just archery, but it's any kind of cardio, it's any kind of aiming, and then of course horsemanship and horse husbandry, which are very neglected, or lost arts, and wrestling. But there's some more details in the group about that kind of stuff, external grounding, grounding the body, grounding the self from the outside with physical activity. There's some more information about that in the last session, and there's some links in the group chat. But these sessions are, about internal grounding, cognitive grounding the heart and the mind from the inside out. And the only way to really do that is with precise language, right? With looking at language very precisely and understanding where meanings come from, understanding, the development of human thought over, the course of human history, but also being precise with our language, being a part of language, and contributing to the long-lasting conversation that is language and meaning and how these things come to be. So again, jazakumullah khair.
So can I add something?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. So just like when you were speaking, I don't know why, I just have this like image of like a horizontal, like a line, right? From like, let's say like the horizontal aspect of our existence, like me and how I connect to God. And so in that sense, like you can access all the names, like every name you access from God. But then there's like this name, I just saw it also like kind of connecting horizontally. What did I say horizontally? I meant vertically. Vertically you access through God. And then horizontally it's like amongst the khalq.
Right.
And what just came to me was there's this qasida that I'm obsessed with. It's called Alfiya Shia. It's like a Moroccan qasida. Basically I think it was this guy that he was hired by a king to make, I think, a ring or some type of jewelry, and then he accidentally broke the gemstone that he was supposed to set into it, and then he was like terrified that the king was going to, like he was going to get into trouble, and then so he sang this song, this qasida, and it's basically reassuring himself about that, Allah is the Razzaq. And then subhanallah, turned out that the king had the king's wife was pregnant. I never mentioned that. Anyway, so the king wanted it for his baby. Turns out that the queen gave birth to twins, so both his gemstones came into use. And anyway, so in the Fiyashia it says, وَالْخَلْقُ عِيَالَ اللَّهِ وَأَنَا مِنْ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ وَالْأَرْزَاقُ عَلَى اللَّهِ نَأْكُلْ مِنْ رِزْقِ اللَّهِ. But yeah, so in that, I just realized something. It's like just the wording. I think this is also hadith, al-khalqu عِيَالَ اللَّهِ, which is like so, it's just like a warm hug from like just everybody. Like,
Can
so
you
for instance, if we look at, yeah,
so could you is it عيال, are you saying الخلق عيال الله? What's
whatever means family. I don't know if it's ayal or ayal, but yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so like yeah, and there's a hadith which basically says every like the creation is Allah's family and Allah loves most those who are most beneficial to his family. So but that's the name, right? Al-Khaliq is the name that's manifesting. So I just realized something, like most of the names that we've been, I guess many of them, they don't they don't manifest, like they're not always manifesting in like creation. So for instance, Al-Mu'min, like Allah is vertically, if I want to access it, I can only access it from Allah, and vertically it will, come to me. But horizontally, not everybody is Mu'min, right? So at any given point, not everybody is in a state of Iman. Even Mu'mineen, like even people like ourselves, like I consider myself a believer, but I could be in a state of khawf. So at any given moment, that name is not always in creation, like manifested, right? So in terms like, in other words, its scope is not infinite and like not everlasting. I mean, but yeah, but at any given moment, we are all makhlooq. So the name Khaliq is always uniting us and like connecting us. So at any given moment, I can be like, oh, you're a makhlooq, I'm a makhlooq of Allah, and Allah is our Khaliq. And there's no moment at which that is not true. So like this name is like vertically connecting, but also like the way I see it is like an interconnected like web of like our consciousness, even like the physical being. And I think that's probably why maybe in healing we use this name, like in theta healing, because a lot of it is to do with childhood trauma. So at any given point, if I were to say mu'min, ya Allah, ya mu'min, right? Okay, that's great that I want to access security. And I do that obviously. But I'm saying a lot of like, let's say, fear or something might be caused to me by somebody who's obviously not in a state of amen. But then if I access it through there, then there's not a lot of healing. But if I access it through Khaliq and I say that person is a, makhluk Allah, I'm makhluk Allah, it creates like a link. And like Allah is our Khaliq, both of us. And that is always true. There's no point at which that isn't true. Then we're like connected, and then there's like, I guess, less separation almost. So if we look at it through, your whole thing about um distance versus separation, uh what was the other one?
Distance versus
Bringing together, gathering versus separating.
yeah, union and separation is a common theme that we come across in
And then there's another one.
well, abstract and concrete. You can kind of apply that to
There's
both.
one more. There is three.
Um, Wait, in what context? Remind me again.
Yeah, like just this, like about meanings, like what you said. But yeah, so basically this is a name of union. Like it is always a name of union.
Right.
It is never a name of separation, because we're never, we're, first of all, we're never separate from the khalq. Like we think even like, like environmental, like in environmental discourse, the word environment doesn't exist in the Arabic language. At no point is Allah singling us out as, I mean, as insan, of course, like we're insan, right? Or alladhina amanu or whatever. But there's no point where God is saying that, oh, the environment is separate from you. Like, it's like, I think it's khalqillah, basically. Like, we're always part of it. So there's nowhere that like khaliq denotes separation. It always denotes union. And it always denotes like, even like physical union, because like, for instance, the air that I breathe is literally coming out from a tree. Like, that's insane. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay. Maybe last thought. What that made me think of really was like Al Khaliq is really kind of, in some ways, like the most neutral name. That's kind of what it made me feel like. If that's a name that you kind of invoke, when you're trying to heal, right, or when you're trying to kind of like relate to creation, right, or relate to your fellow brothers and sisters, right, in like the most simple human way. Khaliq is invoking the name of the creator. Is kind of, it makes sense, right, because it's like the most, it doesn't really even seem to have a connotation, right, like it's just the creator, right, Khaliq. I think there is a connotation, right? Because we say that khalq is related to khuluq, right? Creation is related to character. Um, but I think of all the names of Allah, at least the ones that we've gone through so far, it seems to be like one of the most neutral ones, which kind of evokes maybe
Sorry, I'm gonna have to disagree with you
Oh,
on
no,
that.
go ahead.
It just never ends.
Yeah,
Yeah, so basically this reminded me, but you know what you said is so true. Like we don't see like there's no like obvious connotation, right? Because it's just like, oh, this is just an act that God does.
right.
But everything that God does has meaning. And
Of
so God
course.
doesn't do anything without purpose. The way that this is linked to this name is Allah says everything, الذي خلق ثم هدى, I think. الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى.
Mhm.
Astaghfirullah, I'm probably saying it wrong.
I think
But
I think
khalq
that's right.
and huda are actually inherent, like they're intricately linked in the Quranic discourse. So the way that that works is, for instance, form, it's like form and function. So every makhluk is guided, is created according to the purpose for which Allah created them, and then Allah guided us after creating us. So like I said, the tree, like if I'm breathing air from a tree, it's because Al-Khaliq created it to purify the air, and then to like
Oh, do we lose you?
sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Yeah. So basically, it's this, what's it called? Like instinctive, maybe. I don't know if trees have instinct, but whatever way that the tree is guided to create like oxygen from carbon dioxide.
Mhm.
So it's like it is, and the way that it is created, like the chlorophyll and its spores on its leaves, that is the khalq, right? But that is guiding it. That is part of how it is guided, the khalq, to the huda, to be able to perform its function. Similarly, the human being, the way that we are created, the way that we have eyes, the way that we have a heart, the way that our heart is created, because that's, I guess, the center of the receiving guidance. So with all of those khalq, they very like specifically point to the huda that God guided us to. So it's actually very like the connotation is
Yeah,
very strong. Which is like I just yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think maybe I just mean neutral as relatively speaking, relative to the other names, right? Like at least the names that we've gone through so far, they don't have like very um, distinct sort of like attributes or like characteristics, right? Like, not to say that Khaliq is like a simple thing. Obviously, the creator of the universe is not a simple thing at all. But I think that's just kind of what I meant there. But the other thought that came to me when you were talking about like the healing group and stuff like that was that the other kind of part of these sessions for me, um, or maybe I should say, the other way that I think that cognitive grounding works, or internal grounding from the inside, connecting the heart and the mind. The other aspect of that, I think, which we do in these sessions, is really kind of explore the nature of Allah, right, of God, in its most diverse kind of sense. And I think I may have mentioned this maybe once or twice. I'm not sure if I have actually, but one of the most difficult things I think to kind of relay about God in Islam, and especially in the Quran, and I was reminded of this in the Jummah khutbah that I attended this week. But it's the idea of like the attitude of Allah, right? The persona of Allah, or the personality of Allah. Obviously, God is not a person, but when you read the Quran, when you read His attributes, there is a kind of persona, there is a kind of attitude, there is a kind of, especially in the Quran, it comes out very strongly in the Quran sometimes, where well, the example that I heard in Jummah was about some hadith Qudsi, right, which describe different things. Like there's some hadith Qudsi about like prayer, right, where Allah is describing, His relationship between His worshippers or His believers as like that's between me and him kind of thing, or that's been between me and her, me and them kind of thing, right? And the khatib, the speaker, kind of, described it as like an intimate kind of way of that Allah speaks to us, right? Or an intimacy, or like even kind of like a pillow talk kind of thing. Like, it's not something that, not language that you would really expect of God. But when it comes to Hajj, God uses like boastful language, right? God talks in a very proud way. Like, look at my believers, look at them coming to worship me, and and perfect their character for my sake. So I thought that was another point that I just wanted to share, that like God has a personality, God has an attitude, and we discover that attitude in all its like vastness and beauty by looking close at language, by looking close at creation, and the Quran, and the names that we know of Allah. Yeah. So I think that's my final thought, unless you guys inspire some more. I'm not sure.
No, I think I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done yapping.
No.
My kids would say.
Oh, khair, inshallah. No, it's a beautiful conversation as always. And thank you both. Thanks to everybody who joined in. And yeah, until next time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Sidi.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam.